Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 2327. Today, part 2 of my two-part interview with author Preeti Chhibber. And today we're going to be talking about A Jedi You Will Be. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, once again, Preeti Chhibber is an author, speaker, and freelancer. She's written for Sci-Fi, Polygon, and The Mary Sue, among others. Her debut middle grade novel is Orientation, Marvel's Avengers Assembly #1, and her debut picture book is A Jedi You Will Be. It's released in fall of 2020, along with the Marvel book. She has several books and anthology appearances on the way, but for now you can find her co-hosting the podcasts Desi Geek Girls and Strong Female Characters, and you can learn more about her at preetichhibber.com, and all of that stuff will be linked at the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com. Now, as far as A Jedi You Will Be goes, there's a moment that you're going to hear in the conversation that's coming just a moment from now, or at least that'll start a moment from now, where it occurs to me, like literally in the middle of the conversation, that you can draw a very strong comparative line between A Jedi You Will Be and Dr. Seuss's Oh, the Places You'll Go. It is really that good, and I enjoyed the heck out of the book. Yes, it's a picture book. Yes, it's beautiful. It is so well done, and all the more admirable for being so deep and so brief at the same time, and so accessible to people of all ages. So I'm really thrilled to be sharing this conversation with you, and that I got to have this conversation with Preeti Chhibber, the author of A Jedi You Will Be. Before we get to it, I do just want to say thank you so much, as always, for joining me for this episode. And of course, may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be. And now, here we go. Without further ado, my conversation, part 2 of my interview with Preeti Chhibber, this time focused on A Jedi You Will Be. I'd like to switch over to talking about A Jedi You Will Be, if I may.
Yes, let's talk about it.
Awesome. So I will say that we have not talked a lot about children's books on the podcast, and therefore I'm going to ask a couple of questions that are, very beginner's mind oriented, if you will. For a start, would you mind telling our listeners about the origin of the project? How did it come about?
Sure. It was right around the same time as Clone Wars, actually. Basically, how they both started was I got a DM from Jen Huddle asking if I would like to meet at San Diego Comic-Con last summer, so 2019. And I, of course, was like, yes.
Yes.
I will 100% meet about anything. And so Jen and I met, and we had a conversation about the anthology, and she said, my colleague Caitlin would like to talk to you about potentially doing a picture book, which I was like, I've never written a picture book. I don't know. Like, I've read them. I've worked in children's books for, a decade, but never written one. And they're not easy to write, despite the shortness of the text. But I was like, I'm obviously open to having the conversation. And so Caitlin and I chatted over email a few times, and she basically was like, this is what we want to do. We want some kind of Jedi training picture book that will coincide with the 40th anniversary of Empire. Is that something you'd be interested in doing it? And I love Luke Skywalker, and I love The Empire Strikes Back. So I was like, yes, this sounds fun. Let's do it. And that's kind of where it came from.
That's excellent. And do you get to write it first, or do they provide you with the artwork first and then you're writing around the artwork, or how does that process develop?
So I write it first, and basically what I did was I wrote the manuscript, and then I broke it down by page, and on every page I kind of made notes for what I thought the art could look like. I was like, this is the text, art notes, for example, for the spread that has Yoda, reminding us about remembering where we came from, or whatever it is. I had notes that, you'll see past battles in the sky of what the Jedi have gone through. So you can have this association between what Yoda is talking about and the experiences the Jedi actually have had. So that's kind of how that went. Like, I literally had to write the manuscript and then cut up the lines. Like, every line was cut up, and I put them on a bunch of pieces of paper on my floor so I could see what the flow would look like, page to page, and then what that artwork would need to look like as you're going through the book.
I hope there's a picture of that you're able to share at some point once the book is not. Oh, the book is out actually by now, right?
The book is out, and I did.
Yes, it is.
It's somewhere on the internet. I'll see if I can find it and send it your way. Because I did tweet about it when I was writing it before it had been announced. I was like working on stuff.
I'm so glad that picture exists. That's so terrific to hear. And I did actually, you touched upon something that I suspected, and it's kind of neat to have it confirmed, that writing a children's book and writing so short does not strike me as an easy thing. I mean, on the face of it, oh yeah, there's not many words, so it's not a big deal. But I imagine that it is actually more difficult to do that than it is to, say, have the space to write as much as you need to in a short story, for example, and then be able to trim off here and there. This has to be so precise and so well done and pack so much emotion into such brevity. I imagine this is probably actually one of the most difficult writing jobs there is.
It's very much about the economy of language and making sure that you are every word is important. But how this one started was I essentially had to, again, I watched the training sequences from Empire like 100 times and pulled out what I thought a list of Jedi tenets could be. And that could be translated easily into, talking to little kids. Cause this is like 6 to 8 is what this book is for. I mean, the book's for everybody, but that is who I had in mind when I was writing it. And so pulling then those tenets and trying to use obviously like dialogue we recognize from the film, but making sure it flows in a 40-page picture book is a very interesting proposition. and actually takes a couple rounds of going back and forth with an editor and making sure that it will also work with how the illustrations end up looking. Like Mike Dees, who illustrated the book, is so talented and his work is so beautiful. But they have to work in tandem, the text and the illustrations.
Right. Yeah. And I will say I agree with you wholeheartedly about Mike Dees' work as well. And for me, this book actually reads like it's the Jedi equivalent of Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. Like it's that same kind of thing. And what I love about it too is that it really does seem like you didn't just draw from the training sequences. It seems like there are also elements from both the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy in there, how you relate the language from Yoda about Jedi's not craving adventure and excitement, but you bring that to the Clone Wars. And there's also references to just breathing and about failure, which Luke talks about in The Last Jedi. Yeah,
I mean, to me,
I'm sorry, I have to correct myself. Yoda talked about failure in The Last Jedi too.
Yeah, you're right.
My apologies. I'm sorry, I interrupted to correct myself too. Please continue.
No, that's okay. We know there's a pressure sometimes to be correct in the Star Wars fandom.
Yeah, a little.
No, that was, to me, what was so fun about this book is I love the idea of the Force. I love Force lore. I'm fascinated by every piece of it. And so getting to kind of take what I love about the Force and bring some of my, I'm Hindu, and there's a lot of overlap in Eastern philosophy and the Force. Like there were pieces of Eastern philosophy that are inherent and have been fully integrated into this idea of the Force. And so getting to put some of that on the page of what is a very like deep spiritual meaning to me was really exciting. And that will always pull from all aspects of Star Wars because it's in the lining, it's in the fabric of the story.
Absolutely. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. What would you say out of all of this is what's your favorite Yoda truism or mantra, if you will? Do you have a particular one that jumps out at you?
I think to me the most important aspect is remembering that the Force is in all of us and that we're all connected, because one of the most important aspects that I wanted to get across to kids who are reading this is that your impact matters. What you do matters. You will affect other people in the world, and you should never forget that you will affect the world. And be conscious of your words and your actions and your thoughts and your feelings, because you're not an isolated being.
That's a wonderful message, and I think it's probably particularly important, well, in general, but especially kind of now as well. I think you have possibly given me 5 different ways that you could answer the last question that I want to ask you, and I'm curious to know if it's going to end up being a 6th answer. But the question I'm going to ask you is one that I asked people when I was at Star Wars Celebration last year in Chicago, and because it's Oprah Winfrey's city, or at least a city deeply associated with Oprah Winfrey, it's a variation on the question that she likes to ask, which is, talk about what I know for sure. So the question I want to pose to you, Preeti, is when it comes to Star Wars, what do you know for sure?
What I know for sure when it comes to Star Wars, I think that ultimately what we can take from Star Wars is hope and the necessity of hope and never giving it up, and being mindful of how we move forward in life with always considering that the best is possible, but not forgetting what it could cost.
I love that answer. That's terrific. Thank you so much.
You were very welcome.
So, for anybody who wants to keep up with what you are doing, what new projects you have coming out, what writing you're doing that may not be, gestating over longer terms, that might actually be, articles that you've written for other publications online and whatnot, where should people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at runwithskizzers, Skizzers. You can also look at my website, preetichhibber.com. Those are probably the 2 best places to see what I'm up to.
Wonderful. And I will, of course, link to both of those in the show notes for this episode as well. Preeti Chhibber, thank you so much for joining me on Star Wars 7x7. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for your thoughtful questions.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.